The New Orleans Saints quarterback battle could be coming to an end this week. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, Saints defensive tackle Khristian Boyd might be ready to claim his roster spot again. New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave's had a little bit of a quiet offseason, but I'll tell you why you don't need to panic about that. And we'll kick everything off with a look at the New Orleans Saints quarterback battle, which could be coming to an end this weekend. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms applied. New Orleans Saints quarterback battle has, of course, been the biggest story in the New Orleans Saints world this offseason. And as a big part of that has been, of course, who will be named the starter in all of this. And we could be seeing that decision. We could see that battle finally come to an end just this week. And I think I've got two main times where you will absolutely see this quarterback battle probably be announced, or the winner of that quarterback battle being announced, and one of which, the soonest, could be today. The New Orleans Saints are back on the practice field today on Tuesday. And so in the press conference following practice could be a perfect time for Kellen Moore to come up and say, we believe that X will be the starting quarterback for this season. We have appointed, however it is they're going to go about it. I think that you only do that, though, if Spencer Rattler is going to be your starter. Like if the New Orleans Saints announce a starter on Tuesday, it's because Spencer Rattler is the starter. If the New Orleans Saints do not announce their starter on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, then it's become so very clear that they are giving Tyler Shough every opportunity to win this battle. We kind of spoke about this a little bit in yesterday's episode. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? The team should pick the quarterback that they want, but overall, they need to pick the best quarterback. And if Tyler Shough, for any reason, looks not ready yet, then they need to give him the opportunities to prove that he's ready. So in my belief, and this is just me, this is literally just me speculating, kind of piecing things together. If the Saints don't announce that Spencer Rattler is their starting quarterback here this afternoon, then it feels very likely that they're going to give Tyler Shough an opportunity to go out there on that preseason Week 3 game against the Denver Broncos and try to earn that starting role. But they need to see something else from him if that is the case, based on what we saw against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which wasn't a bad performance, but much like Spencer Rattler's performance up against the Los Angeles Chargers, it was steady and down the middle, while you had the other guy that came in and then had sort of the higher highs and lower lows type of a game. So now both of these guys are pretty much evened out. If you're just looking at the preseason, if you're looking at training camp and adding that in, Spencer Rattler's kind of been ahead for a longer portion of the conversation, but Tyler Shough has had some momentum here as of late. So it would be interesting to see if the Saints decide that they need to go another week with this thing, that they need to go another preseason game with this thing. But if they do, then I think that it's pretty clear that they're doing so in order to give Tyler Shough the best opportunity to prove them right, because that would be the quarterback that they drafted. That's the quarterback that in that case they would want on the field, all those other things. But if the Saints were to make an announcement sooner rather than later, then it's because Spencer Rattler has won this quarterback battle, especially with that, we'll call it a come from behind drive, because it was a tie. It wasn't a game-winning drive, unfortunately, for New Orleans, but that game-tying drive and just seeing how he's performed throughout the regular season, throughout the training camp, it's so clear that going into the regular season that he's been the most consistent option. And remember, the battle is only for week 1. They can always make their change 4 weeks in the season, 3 weeks in the season, 2 weeks in the season, 7 weeks in the season, 12 weeks in the season. It doesn't make any difference, right? Whoever earns the starting role week 1 is not guaranteed the starting role for 17 games. So it could be a situation to where they say, hey, Tyler Shough isn't exactly where they'd like for him to be yet. And so then they go with Spencer Rattler until behind the scenes Tyler Shough gets to where they want him. And then they make that change and give Tyler Shough the opportunity. That's assuming that Spencer Rattler is not going out there and winning games, though. That's where things, of course, get very complicated with the 2 quarterback situation. So we'll see where things go, but you're either going to see a quarterback appointed later on today or probably after the preseason game, or, when I say after the preseason game, I don't mean literally in the press conferences after the preseason game, because I think Kellen Moore would want to speak to the quarterbacks, speak to the rest of his staff before just coming out to media and saying, yeah, this is going to be the thing. But we'll see where things go. This thing could be settled sooner rather than later. We'll see. When it comes down to the performance of both of these quarterbacks, I wanted to highlight something. There's been a lot of conversation. And the thing that I've really loved, honestly, about this quarterback competition is that although there has been loyalism in the fan base, there has often also been nuanced conversation around this quarterback battle. And one of the big nuances is talent around the quarterback. And a lot of Spencer Rattler pro folks have kind of talked about how Spencer Rattler has not seen opportunities with the starting 2 wide receivers, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. So I wanted to put a number to that because I hear that kind of thrown about a bunch, but I haven't really heard a number be put to it. So I went and I did my research thanks to our friends over at True Media. And so I included the preseason from last year, the regular season from last year, and the preseason so far from this year. And Spencer Rattler has seen, drumroll please, 2 reps. 2 dropbacks with both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed on the field. That includes both preseasons as well as the regular season. Now, here's what I am going to say. He has seen a lot of reps with both of those guys on the field in front of the coaches in training camp. So that's not to say that he hasn't had the talent around him. It just hasn't been there or hasn't been available, as was the case last season when it came to his live reps. So when it comes to evaluating the live reps, maybe that's something that they keep in kind of consideration. However, Mason Tipton and Dante Pettis did a really good job making sure that he was still out there being able to make plays in the biggest moment so far of this quarterback battle. So just something to consider there. Tyler Shough did spend Sunday's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars 11 plays with both Rashid Shaheed and and Chris Olave on the field. He went 5 of 7 during those couple of drives while targeting each of those receivers, and that was for just about 27 yards. And of course, there was the Chris Olave drop on that 3rd down, which could have helped that 10-play drive extend into a potential scoring drive. So when it comes down to kind of where things are in terms of utilization of talent and the supporting staff around, Tyler Shough got the edge on Sunday, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to factor or really even should factor into the quarterback conversation because both of these quarterbacks have gotten full first-team reps and opportunities during training camp. And I know everybody wants to make everything about the preseason, but training camp is really, really important, and that joint practice is really, really important as a part of the evaluation as well. One of the key things that I measured during the course of after the first preseason game was under pressure snaps. Both quarterbacks, by the way, this week performed very well there. Spencer Rattler, 5 for 8 under pressure for 45 yards. He did have 1 drop there. He was under pressure for 37% of his dropbacks. Tyler Shough, 3 of 4 for 37 yards. No turnover-worthy passes for either quarterback. No drops for Tyler Shough. Was under pressure for 42.9% of his passes. So this is now the second preseason week in a row. If you want a trend to watch, second preseason week in a row now to where the first team offense gave up more pressure than the later team offenses. So something to watch there when it comes to this offensive line, which has absolutely been a concern for me so far throughout training camp and the preseason. So we'll see where things go there because this quarterback battle becomes quickly irrelevant if the offensive line can't keep pressure off of those passers. So we'll have to see how things improve when Eric McCoy gets in there. And then, of course, as this new look offensive line begins to gel. Coming up next, one of those big weapons that Spencer Rattler has spent very little time on the field with is Chris Olave, who's had a bit of a quiet offseason. But I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be concerned about that or concerned about the quiet offseasons around a couple of other stars that haven't been talked about a lot so far throughout training camp. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for all you sports bettors out there, especially for football fans who want to live out their bold predictions in preseason hunches for just 24 hours. FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, or maybe you're taking a look at a long shot for a division winner, or you're putting them all together with a couple of favorites. It's one of my favorite ways to do like an 8-leg parlay to go with that division winner kind of record. You can also get ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week 1 and much more. As all of that kicks off, this is your moment. Right now, I'm taking a look at Jaden Daniels plus 1,000 for MVP. The Kansas City Chiefs plus 850 for Super Bowl champion there. It's a pretty good bet for me on both of those. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Futures Day is one day and one day only over at FanDuel. Play your game. All right, family. New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave has had a bit of a quiet offseason. We've talked a lot about guys like Mason Tipton and Rashid Shaheed as kind of the standout wide receivers so far throughout camp. So I wanted to go back and kind of dig through my notes and take a look at Chris Olave and how he's been utilized so far throughout training camp, the opportunities that he's getting, and why maybe his name doesn't pop off the page as much as maybe some of these other guys. And I think there's a really real reason why. It's because Chris Olave is doing a lot of dirty work over the course of this offseason. I was speaking with my good friend Darian Gray from over at the Locked On HBCU podcast. Highly recommend you go and check that show out if you're interested in HBCU athletics as a whole, not even just football. But he and I were kind of talking about it, and I said, you know what? Chris Olave's had a little bit of a quieter offseason than I would have expected him to have. And so that made me kind of go back through all of my notes from training camp practices and all that stuff. I promise I'm more organized than I make myself out to look. But as I went through and kind of dug through everything, what I found was that Chris Olave wasn't always being utilized so often as like the big deep threat down the field. Now he's going to get his opportunities to see more deep balls. I know that's something that he wants. I know that's something that Kellen Moore's offense will absolutely have available to him. But he's also been doing a lot of like, hey, you know what? When these young quarterbacks want a quick throw and a completion and somebody to help them get into rhythm, Chris Olave is the guy that they look for. What I noticed that there were more than a few times where each of these quarterbacks, Chris Olave, Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shough, and even a couple of occasions with Jake Haener, to where they went kind of cold, 2 or 3 incompletions or something like that over the course of the last 5 passes, or 2 or 3 in a row or something like that. And the first pass coming out of that sort of dry spell, if you will, almost constantly, I won't say almost always, but almost constantly went to Chris Olave. And so Chris Olave to me kind of came off as a little bit of a safety blanket for these guys, to where they kind of looked for him. And then when they found him, they went to him again and they went to him again. A really good example of this is just looking at this last preseason game for Tyler Shough. Tyler Shough threw, a few passes early on in this game and didn't necessarily have any bad passes or anything like that. Didn't throw a single turnover-worthy pass or anything, but had a moment to where, he had gone for Chris Olave down the field at one point, had an incompletion there, had another incompletion to him later. But you saw him after he went to Cedric Wilson Jr. early and then went to Trayton Welsh for that big 28-yard play, in the next drive. You saw him go to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed like 5 plays in a row. And a big part of that was going to Chris Olave about 3 plays in a row, about 4 passes over the course of maybe about 6. And so he really kind of honed in on Chris Olave. And that's kind of been the story of Olave so far during this training camp series, is that he has been the safety net for these receivers. And so while I think that his offensive game in the passing game is going to open up a little bit here this season, because Kellen Moore is going to ask him to run more of the route tree, go deep, all those other pieces, I also think he's got a lot of value as the guy that just kind of has good timing and good chemistry with both of these quarterbacks, and has the ability to go out there and make a couple of those catches that help get the quarterbacks on rhythm, which help make the entire drive pay off and better and improve and more comfortable and all that, as opposed to just his individual stock. So that's where I'm looking at Chris Olave to be a big focal point in this offense, because he seems to be the guy that the quarterbacks go to when they're uncomfortable and need to get comfortable. That's a pretty good situation for him to be in as a guy that's looking to get back over 1,000 yards, is looking to stay on the field, and it's looking to really take his next step in his career, especially with his college teammate Garrett Wilson getting a huge contract over with the New York Jets, Chris Olave is going to want to earn that money as well, whether it's this year, whether it's after this year or after that 5th-year option. This will be a good start for him to do so. A couple of other players that haven't had super loud off seasons that I just kind of want to explain the why behind it, or the why I believe is behind it. On the offensive side, it's another wide receiver in Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks has not had the loudest offseason. And a big part of the reason why is because he's a guy that's coming off of injury from last year. Let's not forget that. And he's one of the older players on the roster. Chase Young. That's not true. Cam Jordan, my apologies, as well as Demario Davis, all kind of the elder statesmen, if you will, on this roster following the retirement of Tyrann Mathieu. And so I think that for Brandin Cooks, what we've seen is him utilized in a lot of different ways, both in the slot and outside. And he's been a guy that these quarterbacks go to on timing routes quite a bit. So he's got a lot of routes where he's, turning around and the ball's right in his face. And he's got to have those quick hands that he has to go up there and get it. He has made some really impressive receptions, really impressive catches. Unfortunately for a lot of Saints fans, most of them happened while we were in California. But he had these really insane grabs where he turns around and the ball is right there in his face. And the only thing he can do is stick his hands up and catch it. He had another one, a couple of those, maybe 2 or 3 of those in one practice. And in the very next practice, he had one that was just absolutely beamed to him as he crossed the middle of the field, and he had to go up and catch it, but he had to go up and catch it in a hurry, and he was able to do that. So that to me is where his value is. It's in those timing routes, and it's knowing that it's for the quarterbacks, knowing that they can actually get a little ahead of schedule, and 9 times out of 10, Brandin Cooks is going to find a way to at least get a hand on that thing, or at least come away with the catch. And so even though he hasn't been super talked about so far throughout training camp, a big part of it is because he's kind of been held back a little bit to make sure that he's, ready for the regular season. That's kind of the goal with a few of these guys. And 2 other players who have had quieter than usual off seasons, who fall under that same category as Brandin Cooks, are the players that we named earlier. Demario Davis at linebacker, as well as edge rusher or pass rusher, defensive end, whatever it is you want to call it. Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan has exclusively been a guy that I have seen standing up. And every now and then, I could see him maybe moving into a 3-4 defensive end spot, or in a NASCAR package having the 2 stand-up edge rushers in Chase Young and Carl Granderson on the outside, and then having Cam Jordan with his hand in the dirt along with a pass rushing defensive tackle like a Nathan Shepard or a Brian Brzee, for instance, who clearly are locks to make the roster, being that they didn't play during the second preseason game. That was a pretty good indication there. And so I think that you're seeing Cam Jordan maybe have a little bit of a multiple role, but his focus is still very much on rushing the passer, not picking up extra blockers to free up other guys. I mean, that's a part of playing on a defensive line no matter what, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be a guy that's going to be forced to have his hand in the dirt a lot. They're going to let him go out there, rotate, and rush the passer. And I know people have their things to say about Cam Jordan, but when he was allowed to rush the passer more last season, and when he saw more snaps last season, he was more effective than he was when he was held out of action. So that's the thing that I'm looking at here for this 2025 season for him. And then Demario Davis, same thing, right? Not being overworked, but you know what it is that he's going to do, and you know what it is that he's going to bring to this team. He's done all the pre-game speeches and all that other stuff, so I don't think you got to worry about him at all. But I wanted to explain why maybe some of the off seasons were a little bit quieter than usual for some of these big name players, and a lot of it is just making sure that these guys are ready to be on the field at week 1 of 2025. All right, coming up next, a couple of guys might have stolen and sealed their roster spots, leading off with the guy that absolutely deserves it in defensive tackle, Khristian Boyd. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Have you and your friends ever decided you're going to go to a ball game super late, and then you jump on and you try to figure out a way to get tickets and you're having trouble? Well, the best way to pick up your last minute tickets without all the stress is with the Game Time app. Game Time makes it super easy for you to pick up tickets, and with all the money that you're going to be saving, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even bring a bigger group with you as well if you want to. Game Time helps make it all possible. A couple of my favorite things about the Game Time app: you can see your view from your seats before you buy the tickets, all in pricing. You can toggle on so that there's no surprise fees by the time that you get to checkout. And of course, those zone deals as well. They'll pick the best seats for you in your section. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets by checking out Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Khristian Boyd is one of, I've got 4 players that I think might have locked up a roster spot for week 1, or at least on the initial 53-man roster with their preseason week 2 performance. I want to start off with Khristian Boyd, who I think has just been outstanding here throughout the preseason. Yeah, he had the sack that was nearly a fumble, or it was nearly a safety rather, that didn't turn out to be a safety, but that's not going to take anything away from him. He still had a really, really solid off-season showing. He actually totaled 6 different pressures throughout the 2 preseason games. One of the most active pass rushers for New Orleans, including that sack against the Chargers. And then he had another 3 hurries against the Jaguars, playing at nose tackle, by the way, and just 1 missed tackle over the course of this time as well. 2 run stops, 1 in each game. So he's just been one of these guys that has been consistently disruptive in the pass rush game, but also consistently active in the run stopping game as well. And that's exactly what the Saints need. They're going to need a backup nose tackle behind Davon Godchaux. Colin Saunders has been traded away, and a big reason why I think that the Saints were likely very comfortable trading away Colin Saunders is because of how quickly Khristian Boyd has arrived on the scene. This is looking like a very comfortable situation for him. He's back at that nose tackle role, which he played during his entire time over at Northern Iowa, and he's being developed even further. Bo Davis has done a great job with him, helping him expand his pass rush move arsenal, helping him become a bit more of an effective pass rusher, and freeing him up to attack and play comfortably. And so far, all of that has been paying off when it comes to Khristian Boyd. So I think Khristian Boyd has done a very good job for himself, sewing up a roster spot and putting himself in position to be able to go out there and be on this active roster in 2025, which he was in 2024. But I think the difference here is that he's going to see himself actually get out on the football field. A big part of the frustration around his season last year is the fact that he was on the active roster and very rarely got his opportunities out on the field. He was constantly inactive. And there were a lot of narratives out there that, oh, well, there must be something bad if he's not. No, there wasn't a role for him, and the Saints drafted him to try to turn him into something that he very clearly was not. Now, all of a sudden, he gets fit into a scheme that fits him a lot better and gives him an opportunity. We said once Brandon Staley was hired as New Orleans Saints defensive coordinator that this was one of the guys that was going to benefit, and so far that's exactly what has happened. I think Khristian Boyd has begun to sew up his roster spot. We'll see if they get a look at him in the 3rd preseason game, or if they say, hey buddy, you're good, no need to get out there, and let these other guys go out there and try to find jobs, not just with the Saints, but with other teams as well. Another guy that I want to highlight that I think has sewn up a roster spot, and we've been bragging about him all since that Chargers game, Torricelli Simpkins, the undrafted free agent offensive lineman. I was fixated with the wrong undrafted free agent offensive lineman, apparently, going into this 2025 preseason, where I was talking about Easton Kilty out of Kansas State, but it has been Torricelli Simpkins who has absolutely stolen the show, jumping in and playing. He played 97% of snaps at center in the first game, came back and played all but 1 drive in the 2nd preseason game at center, and did excellent. He was awesome. During that Chargers game, he allowed 1 hurry, 1 pressure that came on a 3rd and 14. During this game up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he allowed 2 pressures throughout this game, but solid play and just relentless aggression anytime that he is on the field. He is constantly trying to knock guys down, go and chase them down. I knocked this guy down. Can I go and find somebody else to hit? He is just relentless and a dog on the field. We talked about it in the live show following the Saints preseason tie with the Jaguars that we needed to bring back Dog of the Day just because of Torricelli Simpkins to give him the award. And I think he absolutely deserved it. He is one of the rare dogs right now on this team, outside of guys like Demario Davis and the guys that are already proven, But as of right now, the team is trying to establish who those guys are. Danny Stutzman obviously has that potential. Kelvin Banks Jr. has been awesome, has not allowed a single pressure so far this offseason, and maybe even more importantly throughout the preseason, no penalties either against a rookie that has stepped in. He's the highest graded offensive lineman by Pro Football Focus, so you're getting a dog there, but you're getting another one here in Torricelli Simpkins, who I think has been awesome so far this offseason. So he's been great. Here's a guy we don't talk about very much, but that I've always been pretty high on. Ugo Amadi. Ugo came in to this camp after being re-signed and had to effectively fight for a spot behind Alontae Taylor as one of the backup slot guys. Now, he's a safety through and through and gets those opportunities. He played 11 free safety snaps, for instance, earlier this preseason. But a big part of where the role has been for him has been as a backup nickel corner, a backup slot guy. And he has been the primary go-to in that conversation, along with Terrell Burgess over the course of the past week or so. Remember, Alontae Taylor had a groin injury during that Friday scrimmage practice right before the Sunday Chargers preseason game and has not been back out on the practice field so far since. We'll see if that changes later on today or throughout this week. But Ugo Amadi has been one of the two guys that has been most in that rotation. And Terrell Burgess ended up with an injury during that Rams joint practice last Thursday. And so he wasn't available to participate in the game up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so that's what led partially to Ugo Amadi playing 33 snaps throughout this game, with a bunch of them, 29, coming in the slot. He played 11 at free safety the week before that, along with 14 in the slot against the Chargers, but 29 of his reps all came in the slot, and he didn't give up really much of anything. 2 catches for 17 yards, and he has been excellent here throughout training camp as well. Several pass breakups, even when he's having to guard like bigger guys like tight ends and all that. I think that he has been a guy that's absolutely sewed up a spot. And speaking of tight ends, Trayton Welch, definitely one to watch. I thought Michael Jacobson was going to be one of the guys that was going to come in here and steal that third tight end spot while it's still available. But Trayton Welch, that big 28-yard reception, his blocking ability, he has shown to be somebody that is absolutely in the running for that spot too. So hasn't locked it up yet, but definitely a name to watch. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, maybe there's a starting quarterback. We'll break all that down, and of course, we'll go live to give you everything you need to know from practice. Don't forget, you can catch us over on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every day, 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. as well. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, N-O-L-A. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.